Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be getting started on a three-part series dedicated to the An-2, the Anushka. This is a pretty wild airplane, we're very spoiled that we have it over here in Microsoft Flight Simulator. We've seen this airplane in other simulators, and I've even done videos on this airplane in other simulators, but man, it is exciting to finally get it over here in Flight Sim itself. For those of you who are not familiar with this plane, this is one of the largest and heaviest biplanes in history. It is also the largest and heaviest single-engine biplane in history. And even though they made more than 18,000 of these with the 1940s design, there are still many, many, many of these things still in production today, just to give you an idea of how incredibly long this plane has been going. So let's climb on in and get started. Now, first things first, when you climb into this thing, it's a little different than what you probably think of a conventional plane. This is a neat example of sort of that 1930s, 1940s, 1950s transition from the days where you basically kind of flew using what I call the think system, and the TLR, that looks about right, and it started moving towards kind of more modern aircraft. And of course, along the time, there's been a significant amount of modernizations. And no, please do this. We're in the middle of northern Siberia right now, so I wouldn't recommend opening that window, but oh well. So the aircraft has a bunch of systems that are designed to basically enable it to be an incredibly rough takeoff and landing airplane, very short field plane. It's designed to be easy to maintain. You have to do a lot of maintenance on it, but it's easy to maintain. And it has a lot of systems built into it basically to make it so that it's just a rugged, let's go anywhere plane. Plus, I mean, look at this. The darn thing is glazed. The other thing I love, too, is if you come down here and open up the door real fast. Look at this. You can bring your entire family and immediate family. Yes, this door handle does work. I recommend don't playing with that door handle. You're going to have trouble getting it closed. So let's get started. So the first things first, before we go into getting this thing going, and especially this lovely ARC radio system, the ARC-15. I've got lots of experience with this. And yes, I'm sorry, but everything will be in Cyrillic. It's not a bad thing once you know where to look for a lot of the things. Zapushk. Everybody knows that one now. Start. And we'll go ahead and go over the systems on this one. We'll go start up today. Next video we'll dedicate to dealing with the lovely ARC system, which is just an ADF. It's just a funky version of ADF. You'll see what I mean. And of course, the final video will deal with putting this thing back on the ground. So let's do this. So the first stop when we're going to be looking through our systems is over here on our left. Now, the left side of this aircraft, right next to the pilot here, you have a lot of critical controls that you're going to need, mostly for the comfort of the crew. But the other thing you're going to notice is this big one right here, KRRAN, KRAN. This thing right here, this is your pneumatic system charge valve. Now you're going, wait, what? This system is responsible for pressurizing your brakes. Now on this aircraft, you have a very unique way of holding the brakes. Those of you familiar with the Spitfire recognize this lovely handle right here. You'll notice when I squeeze it, it's making all sorts of crazy noises here. The reason it's making all sorts of crazy noises is because it's a pneumatic brake. I've just engaged the parking brake. The problem is this brake does not work unless it has air pressure. So if you actually look down here, you can see our little gauge. This would be the pressure of each individual brake. Now, on the old style Russian aircraft, when you held the brakes and you differential pedaled, it would actually lock up one brake and not the other one. Those who are familiar with the MiG-21, you're actually familiar with this system already. For us right now, there's no brake pressure because we haven't actually activated the brakes. Also on this side, we have stuff such as the primer, we've got our oil dilution, and we have all of our stuff responsible for our comfort. You also have a couple switches here so we can check the emergency lights out to make sure they work, to make all the emergency sounds, everything like that. We also have a little fuel indicator. We'll talk about this later. We have our fuel selector cock here. Right now it's set to none. If we were to click this to this position, that'll give us both fuel tanks. We got a left fuel tank, we got a right fuel tank. For now, I'm going to leave it right here. This switch right here, I haven't really found a use for it, at least not in the sim, but what this would do is this would allow you to actually pump fuel out of like a random oil drum that you have kind of chilling right here directly into the plane. It's almost like an extra fuel pump. It's kind of cool. That switch doesn't work. Bummer. To the front of that, of course, you have your floodlight. I haven't played with that very much. Swinging over on our left-hand side, we have a modern communication radio. It's interesting they put this one in here instead of the old-style Soviet version or the Russian version at the time, but it works. I'm not complaining. I'm going to go ahead and hide the yoke so we don't have to get blocked. Now, the instrumentation on this thing, oh boy, it's a little different than what you've probably seen before. All the critical stuff you're used to is there, but believe it or not, it's just in a different place, or it has a different unit on it. Starting over here on our left-hand side, this lovely guy is our altimeter. You'll probably go, oh, it's in hundreds, it's in thousands, oh, whoa. It's in meters. And to make things even more fun, if you look in this little window here, you have your barometric pressure. This is in millimeters of mercury. So 760 is pretty darn close to sea level pressure of 2992. For the folks over in the States there. The big thing you got to watch out for this thing is you're working in meters, and meters are bigger. I know that's like for folks who do the metric system day in and day out. It's like, well, yeah. But for us folks who grew up on landing things in feet, it's a little different. Down here, we have our radar altimeter. A word of advice, by the way. when you activate electricity to the radar altimeter, you're going to get a beeping noise in your ears that won't stop until you evacuate the altitude that you're at. So if you intend to use the radio altimeter or the radar altimeter, one of the things I recommend doing is cranking this sucker down so it's all the way down to zero or very close to zero, and crank it back up to whatever specific altitude that you need. Now remember, this is in meters again. So if you're looking for a quick and easy, I need to know what unit is what unit kind of a thing, usually setting it to about 20 meters is going to get you pretty close to 100 feet. Usually about 60 meters is going to be the magic, 200 feet of a typical instrument approach there. To the right here, we have our fuel gauge. Depending on what mode you have this set on, right now, if I initialize power, which I'm not going to, I'm saving my battery intentionally for startup. You'll see what I mean. This would tell you exactly how many liters of fuel. If you hit the switch over here on the left or right, you can select one of the two fuel tanks and see exactly how much you have. Above that, you have a warning light. One tells you you have 55 liters left. The other one tells you have 45 liters of fuel. If you let this thing get down this low, you're busted. This thing cruises at like 65 gallons per hour. So it's going to be sucking that fuel down really, 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 really fast. This switch right here says heading indicator fast alignment. What that will do is that will attempt to read your heading off the magnetic compass and copy it onto this tool here. Now, to make your life miserable, if you go immediately north of that, this guy right here is a directional gyro. These are actually both directional gyros. This one right now is actually arrested, hence the arrest right there. You'll notice if I pull the switch, do you notice how I can kind of give this a wiggle and actually adjust the heading? This heading will not agree with this heading, and it certainly will not agree with this heading. Welcome to classic aircraft here. You can see right now that we're about 304 degrees. So if I were actually to flow down here, if I were to set this correctly, I'd actually have to come in here and set this to 304 degrees and then push it in to unarrest it. So it would actually be able to start rotating on its own. This will go nuts on you. Fortunately, if you press the D key on the keyboard, it'll quickly snap that to the correct setting. This one has the same problem, and it will process very dramatically on you. This one right here is the attitude indicator. It's typical of Eastern attitude indicators. Basically, instead of having like the blue and red, and this moves around, the background moves around, and we stay still here. Notice it also has this little cage option. If I disengage the cage, do you see how it goes, aww, it sort of rotates to the side. The reason it does that is because there's no pressure. There's nothing to hold it there at this time. On our right-hand side, of course, we have some useful information as far as this is for a starter here. This is going to be telling us what it's going. This little red light, if you look real quickly, generator, this is right there. It's going to turn on to let us know that our generator is not operational. This aircraft has a generator, not an alternator. What that means is if your RPM drops too low, the generator will drop. And when you do that, you'll start burning things off your battery. So if you're sitting here at idle for a while, don't be surprised if you go, oh no, what happened as everything shuts off because your battery basically died. The good news is if your engine's running, you can just tap the gas and the generator will come back online. Speaking of that, if you look to the right of that, you have an indicator of your current voltage. If you press this one, it's going to give you voltage. If you let go, it's going to give you amperage. Right now, we're charging would be down here. We're burning voltage or amperage is going to be up here. So right now, we're not doing anything because we've got nothing turned on. Directly below that, you're going to have a couple critical instruments. This is our manifold pressure gauge. It's for folks from me in the United States, this is different. You'll notice it has 4, 5, 6. Yes, this is going to millimeters of mercury times 100. So this is actually 760 millimeters of mercury here. You also notice it's got a lovely yellow range that's beyond atmospheric pressure because this is a supercharged engine. You also notice we have the distinctive little red line. As a general rule, this aircraft is it's a pretty robust radial engine. It can tolerate a lot, but it's not so much manifold pressure that will destroy your engine. It's RPM, which is going to be indicated by this one down here. Below that, of course, you have your handy-dandy cylinder head temperature gauge. You'll notice it reads 0. It's actually below 0 right now. There's no electricity to it, so you're not going to get anything. To the left of that, of course, you have your oil temperature, oil pressure, and importantly, your kg for SM squared here. This is going to be your fuel pressure. Right now, there's none because we have no fuel pressure. Don't worry about it. To the right of that, we have all of our light switches. They're all labeled for you to make your life a little bit simpler. I'm actually going to turn on the 2 bacon lights now. This little thing that says AZS on the bottom, that's just referring to how big of a circuit breaker is. These are circuit breakers. It's a little different than what people think of over in the West. But again, this is just saying it's 5 amps. Just kind of give you a heads up. The middle. These are going to be all your electrical circuit breakers. As I've said before with Eastern aircraft, you generally have a button to turn on the button. That's universal. That's just how it is. By the way, if you're wondering what this is, there's your starter power, magnetos, and your start switch, which is kind of a pain in the butt to use. You'll see what I mean. All right, so these are going to be all your power systems, all your different components of this. This is all your flight control powers and trims. This one over here are going to be all your avionics. General rule, you leave these off until you absolutely have to use them. Over here, you're going to have all of your important systems like your panel lights, your warning lights, your cowl flaps, stuff like that. Below that is going to be some cabin lighting. This is your pitot heat. Notice it is a protected switch. Over here, you're going to have all your critical internal cabin lights. One warning, by the way, when it comes to electricity, there's the next light down, and that is your power inverter. For those of you who are not familiar with this inverter, this is a PO500. It's a very classic kind of Eastern sort of power inverter. You'll see this on a lot of Eastern aircraft, especially the Soviet era. And what will happen here is when you turn this thing on, you have two different modes. Basically, you have kind of the primary, and then you have the backup. I broke the first one. Don't hit the switch if other things are electrically engaged. So if I have my ADF over here and I hit the switch, let's say this is turned on and I click the switch on, that would cook the fuse inside that inverter because there'd be such a jump of electricity. Instead, you'd engage the inverter, then flip on your stuff over here. So that's why they give you two of them, because they know that the silly people here, the Petrovich, is going to accidentally hit the wrong one, comrades. Over here, we have a tailwheel lock. You barely need this in Flight Sim. I'm sorry, Flight Sim, but you do not know how tailwheel airplanes work. Below that, you have all the power switches to your gauges. You'll notice there's a bunch of different gauges here. You only need to flip the ones that you absolutely need. Obviously, with the alternator, it's a generator, people. It's not an alternator. You'd have to flip the switch on for any of that to work. And one of the things they modeled correctly, which, to their credit, you'll actually lose RPM when you turn the alternator generator on. I love that. Coming down here, I have a couple important things here. This is going to be your flap setting. Right now, we're at flap 0. Normally in this aircraft, it is you press and hold to reduce the flaps or put them back down. So you can see right now they're at 0. This is your oil shutter. This is going to tell you exactly where your oil radiator shutter position is. I've got great news. You don't have to worry too much about this on account of the fact you're going to set it to 50% and never do it again in your life. So the next problems is these handles. My first handle, by the way, I love this. GAZ. You put gas right on it. By the way, if you're wondering where the flap switch is, it's right there. This is actually a button to extend flaps. I just got such a kick out of that. On this side, of course, you have your mixture handle. Now, are you ready to be very confused? Because you will be. So this goes forward for power. Cool. My propeller control goes forward for power, for increased RPM. Cool. What about these two? Well, this is my fuel valve. This needs to be forward to let fuel in, not backwards. See how you get confused there? Forward. And this one is your carburetor heat. If you're wondering about the carburetor heat, by the way, don't worry. You can just come right over here and check what your carburetor temperature is. I haven't really needed it yet, but maybe I'm not flying it correctly. Behind that, you're going to have a lot of switches. You have your pitch trim. No, there's no big wheel like you get on 172. It's electric. Relax. You also have these buttons for rudder and aileron trim. This will tell you if you're ready for takeoff. This would be the takeoff position lights here. We have the oil shutters. Like I said, put it on half. Forget about it. And then we have the cowl flaps. We'll be dealing with these cowl flaps a lot. It's an old, greasy, oily radial engine. It's going to need some cowl flap option. Swinging down here, of course, we have a couple of things. We have airflow if you need to kind of warm up your feet and stuff like that. On this side, I told you there's a lot to this. Let's go get this guy out of the way so we don't have to see. This is like the co-pilot seat. Keep in mind, in the middle here, we have the ARC radio. This is an ARC 15, I think. We'll talk about this in a different video. There's a lot of stuff that goes on to this one. You also have the inner and outer channel selector, which is like awesome. B&D, I love it. And of course, we have the ACHS-1 stopwatch / clock, which is an awesome little piece of work here. Basically, you have two stopwatches. You have the one at the top, you have the one at the bottom. You can actually push it, and you see how it turns white and red. This one will now go. You push that again to stop it. You push it again to reset it. So it's just kind of a neat little stopwatch here. Always wanted to buy one of these. And then at the bottom, you have another stopwatch, and this one, obviously, SEK, right at the bottom. You can stop it and reset it if you need. One of the reasons we use these a lot is when you're starting the engine, you crank this and you push the two buttons at the same time, wait for the number 15, and then you crank the engine over is one of the common methods I've seen. Airspeed over here on the left. Notice we don't have our stall speeds. Yeah, you can get a little slower than that. Ignore that one for now. Carburetor temperature, same button on the other side. This one will not agree with this one, by the way, on this side. They never line up, which is so realistic. Of course, we have a backup instrument. You notice this is PO500. This is our inverter. This is going to tell us how hard that thing's working. Right now, not at all, so I'm not worried about it. And coming down here, we have a couple switches. You have the important fan switch. Without it, we're busted. Over here in the middle, you have your transponder. Fortunately, they made this one really easy. Click, click, and we're done. So if we wanted to do some VFR flying in the United States, we could go flip it over to 1200 right now. You don't have to worry about this switch over here. This would allow us to save 2 codes. You can run it through the test. This one doesn't work, unfortunately, which is like, they didn't like us enough. When you come over to this side, you're going to have just a couple extra little kind of doodads. You can kind of put some stuff in there. All right, enough talking. Let's get this thing rolling. So this aircraft is awesome. Like I said, they really took some time to detail it. Because I got it with the An-2 25, it cost me $10. Greatest $10 I've spent in Flight Sim so far, in my opinion. So anyway, first thing we're going to do is we're going to float down here. We're going to open up the pressure charge valve. You're going to make sure that comes to the left here. When you do that, that's going to give you some pressure for your brakes. I'm going to go ahead and give my brakes a quick little squeeze. And you're going to notice that your brakes, I'll go ahead and release them. You can see that we have pressure in them, which means we're not going to go taking off early. If you do not see these on, you either don't have your parking brake set or you don't have enough pressure to actually get us going. While I'm over here, of course, I'm going to double check to make sure my fuel selector is on both. If you need some lighting, we'll talk about the lighting in a minute. It's a little weird. We'll go ahead and I'll click that on if we need to at this time. So now what I'm going to do is hit my 2 bacon switches. They're already on. They're ready to rock. I'm going to make my way up here. We have our battery switch. Again, the general rule is turn the supplier on, then turn the demander on. Don't turn everything on, just turn on the battery. No, bad. That's not how we do it. Again, it's flight sim. You can do whatever you want. But in general, that's what we do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the battery switch here. You're going to get a warning on the generator. It says right there, like I said. And you're going to notice that we're pulling basically nothing. As a matter of fact, if I were to come down here and hit these 2 off, you'll see that we're basically 0 as far as electrical drain goes. We don't want to kill the battery. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over here and turn in just what I need. These are really fun to turn on. I don't need to. This is nice because it's going to tell us if we have fuel. You can see it starting to rise. We have this one right here, engine parameters. Notice that was a pretty big electrical drain here. There's a reason why I'm taking my time. Also, notice how cold my engines are. Yuck. All right, our oil shutters and flaps. I'm going to go turn on my temperature indicators. This is useful. As you can see, it's pretty cold outside. Like I said, we're in the middle of Siberia, and it's kind of late winter here, so it's a little. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get the aircraft ready for starting. At this point, of course, our cowl flaps are already closed. I'm not going to worry about those. I'm not going to waste battery trying to get that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm that my throttle is in the correct position. I'm just going to crack it a little bit. RPM is all the way up, just the way I like it. Mixture is all the way forward. Yes, that is forward. Forward is backwards. I did not design this thing. All I know is many Petroviches have accidentally pulled that handle in the wrong direction. I promise you they have. We're going to make sure fuel valve is forward. We're going to make sure our carburetor is up, back. We're going to make sure it's nice and cold. Cowl flaps we're going to leave alone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here to the primer. I'm going to go ahead and crank this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whoop, 5, 6. And then we're going to get ourselves some fuel pressure. As you can see right now, I have none. So the fuel pressure, we have ourselves a wobble pump. So what you do is you go, do one of those things, and that'll get us some fuel pressure, which it did. We're going to go ahead and come over here. Starter power is going to come on. We're going to switch the magneto over. And we're going to go ahead and grab the clutch. This is a flywheel start. So we pull to the left and hold it, and then we jam it to the right to start it. All right, here we go. So do you see how my ammeter just spiked? Do you see how it's starting to wiggle? What we're doing is we're waiting for it to get to the lowest value. So right now I'm at about 90 amps, and we're going to push it over the hard way. And that's it. Oh, listen to that. That's awesome. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close my window. I don't need it right now. And I'll go ahead and close the window on the other side. Like I said, not too bad. In the real plane, of course, it doesn't start that nice. As I've said a million times. Once we get the engine going, we want to hold usually between 800 and 1,000 RPM. We don't want to be giving it too much here because our engine is amazingly, I don't know how it warmed up to 100 already. It's a cold engine. All right, I'm going to go tap it, give it a couple blasts real quickly, and we're going to go ahead and lean the mixture just a tiny bit here. We don't need to do anything too excessive. So we're warming up now. It's a good time to get everything turned on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my attitude indicators. They're going to start spooling up. It's going to take them a while to actually going. I'm going to go ahead and secure my starter here. I'm happy with that. In the old days, what you do is you pull this out and you push this in, but depending on which version you have, you had this switch too. All right, I'm not touching the inverter. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get things that we need. We'll see panel lights, warning lights. We don't need that warning light. I like those. Anti-fire system. It's going to cause this light to turn on. Don't worry. It just means it's working. We're going to go turn the brakes on. That seems like something useful. This is the air compressor. All right, now wing flaps are on. Flaps master. Aileron trim. This is rudder trim power. We're going to turn that on. Comm radios. We can go ahead and turn those on as well. I'm just going to look to my left. See? I almost fell for my own trap here. So the comm radios, because it is AC and because these other components are AC, we're actually going to engage the power inverter. And then we're going to go hit our lovely switches here. And again, normally what you do is you turn one on, you go check the inverter. You turn it on, you go look at the read. You go turn it on. And this one I recommend skipping, because if you don't skip it, see, I was too good. I made sure I set this to the correct value. Here, listen. Hear it? Yeah, that's going to make you insane. So if you're going to do that, I'll make sure that you've either shut this one down or you've taken the time to get everything else going. So now I'm going to go flip on my generator. Notice the engine went, and now notice everything's running. And yes, I should have turned my generator on before hitting all those switches. Bad form, bad form. So now that that's done, our electrical systems are enabled. Everything's looking pretty good. We've got all our systems on. If we wanted to, we could, of course, could flip on our ADF. We'll deal with this one. I love this. This is such a cool ADF. Again, I'm a nerd when it comes to these things. Now it's just a matter of getting all of our systems kind of configured and ready to rock here. So again, I'm showing a positive charge on the generator. Again, down here is positive charge. I'm going to look over here. We're going to confirm that the inverter is working. It's working very hard right now, which does not surprise me in this latest. If we needed to, we could push this button, just double check the voltage. Nice, 27 volts is typical of Eastern aircraft. So now what we want to do is we want to get the engine from melting on itself. So what I'm going to do is I'll leave the cowl flaps closed, which is going to be this big switch right here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack the oil shutters. Open is away from you on this aircraft. So go ahead and push that oil shutters button and just hold it until you get that lovely little thing right there in the middle. I'll give it a tap. And what you're doing basically, if you've ever looked at this engine from the side, is you got your little radiator, you're just cracking it open to basically keep it cool. All the experiences I've ever had with this aircraft and all the times I've flown it with things, I've never had to do it any other setting than half. So I might change. I'll keep an eye on it, kind of a thing like that. Hey, get back where you want. Sweet. Now you're wondering about the cowl flaps. I'm going to leave the cowl flaps closed. The reason being is it's freezing, and we want to let the engine warm up a little bit. But obviously, if you're concerned, at any point you can crack those cowl flaps open. Again, for on the ground, if it's a hot summer day, crank them all the way open. Don't leave them just peeked open like that, because we're looking pretty good. RPM is beautiful. Everything is beautiful. Believe it or not, we're going to start pressurizing again. This will start building up a little bit more pressure, which is what we want. If it was a hot day, of course, we could hit the most important switch in the entire Soviet Union, which is the fan switch. But I'm a big fan, so I don't need to have something like that. You also have your window heat over here, and of course, if you want to test to make sure this works, there's a little switch over here. If you want to hear a nice little bell. Yes? Hello? I just love that. I think that's such a nice touch. And now our aircraft is ready to rock. We have our arc all set up. We could go through that step, and now all we have to do is get our last couple instruments. So what I like to do first is I like to confirm that this is in the correct setting, and then we go like that. Remember, if the light is on, that means we can adjust it. The light is off, it means we can't. You can always press the D key to quickly reset it if you need. Now this one's a little bit more annoying. What you would normally have to do is you'd have to sit there and set the GFC, gyro flex compass, to the correct position. Don't worry about it. Just press and hold that button until those numbers agree with each other. Now if I hold this long enough, hopefully my co-pilot on my right here, Petrovich, what are you doing? We'll go ahead and make sure all my controls are set on his side, but I promise you, he's busy working out downstairs or, trying to talk to the passengers or something like that. And yes, you will have to update this compass from time to time, or the directional gyro, it will fail on you. Now, one of the things I've said before in other videos dealing with Eastern aircraft is I like to a lot of times kind of set this when I get on the ground. You see how it's doing the wobbly thing? We don't have a lot of air pressure right now, so it's going to struggle just a little bit. So I'm going to go and pull that out. I like to pull it out when I'm taking off. That's just me, because as you're going at low RPMs, you're not developing a lot of vacuum. The thing goes wah, and just kind of goes all over the place. Yes, wah is a technical term. So I'm going to go ahead and set my compass on this side. So as you can see, the aircraft really isn't that scary once you kind of take a look at it. The starting process is awesome. I wish I had one of those on every plane that I fly, because they work great. And one of the things I really respect about the people who modeled this aircraft here is they really took the time to get all the sound effects right. It's chuggy. That's the best way to describe the sound effect. And the fact that, if I kill the generator, my RPM will go back up, that's amazing. They actually took the time to get all those little details right. And I really respect that. I think that's really, really awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it at this for this particular video here. You can see our engine is running. It's happy. It's making its little kind of happy noises there. Our next video, of course, we're going to be doing a little bit of flight, and I'll be going over the navigational system on this one. It is an NDB/ADF kind of setup, and it works really, really well, believe it or not. It just requires a little bit of the think system, I guess I'll call it. Enjoy.